Let's do a quick. Okay, so if you hadn't seen all these live streams with us blokes many times before, very quickly, this is not just academic discussion. We want to improve the world. We don't want to just be right. We want to make things better. My brief intro is I'm a Muslim. I do happiness classes for non-Muslims. That means you don't have to be a Muslim to even adopt these ideas. These are just ideas that I think make the world a better place. That's me. Who wants to go next? Introducing themselves.
Mr. Dust, come with a 2-year guarantee not to rust. And that's only European wide, by the way. No, it's almost like I made that joke a moment ago. And yeah, I'm fundamentally about human rights built into a constitution, which is then represented in a democracy. That's what I've always spoken about at the Speaker's Corner, and I've done that from day one, and that's been my platform. Martin, hang on, there's background noise from somebody.
Okay, they'll be gone soon. They're just
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm Martin. So I've been here a few times. It's cool to be back again. I like the little discussion thing and all these ideas, and I do think this is a good format to go through ideas and kind of expose maybe the faults that we have in each other's ideas, so we can all kind of correct them. And it's good for an audience to listen to this because they can also do the same mental exercise. It's good for each of us to do that. So yeah, it's a good format.
Fantastic. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so Dust, you came up with this next question. Rise in shoplifting, proof that capitalism failed. That's missing a few keywords in between to make a nice YouTube title. But basically, has capitalism failed, and is the rise in shoplifting evidence of that? What do you think, Dust?
So just to start, remember, we can interject with statements over the speaker's in his 5 minutes, so don't be shy about interrupting, and that's part of a debate. Right, thank you very much for introducing that. That's so elegant of you. And again, I've got a great, wonderful YouTube channel you have, or whatever this is. So, capitalism, what's the sign of failure? People are shoplifting. We have now in our media, which is obviously owned by billionaires of an Abrahamic background, now telling us shoplifting's rising, terrible plight, absolute horror. They are spreading violence and spreading all sorts of nastiness amongst their attempts to commit this devilish, horrendous and heinous deed, which is shoplifting. Are we really meant to take these billionaires and millionaires sincere that they're caring about crime? Are we meant to take that sincere when each moment of the day they steal money from the working class, not paying taxes? Who's the shoplifter here? Who's the thieves here? Who's the criminals here? It's their newspapers which telling us you're the criminal. And let's just give a little framework of this reality today, which the billionaires have made. Donald Trump, Tony Blair, these horror shows of existence in Abrahamic nature. Rupert Murdoch, who just stepped down recently because of Donald Trump and his insanity, which is quite humorous. Oh, shizer, I haven't put the clock on, so I'll just take a minute off, or whatever you feel. So we now have millionaires telling us, oh, shoplifting, terrible. But these same millionaires from Iceland, the CEO of Iceland was saying, yeah, shoplifting, terrible. But this is the same man with tax evasion and the same man that sold sold horse meat as cow meat to people for God knows how long. He's committed many crimes, and his pollution, terrible pollution they've created. The real criminals here, I suggest, is capitalism. And we live in the framework, as I was just about to say, before I realized my clock wasn't even going, was that we live in a framework where they have purposely and with heinous passion committed the world, not them, the world, to austerity, to food banks, to intense suffering and poverty. I think it relates quite nice to the subject we were just speaking to earlier from these Abrahamic boys. They represent the Satan, and they make hell on earth. They make our lives hell. And what happens in austerity? People do desperate acts. And what is one of these desperate acts? It's a very thing that they have created. They created a horrible austerity, and now they're blaming you for committing any act that you do. And survival in desperation always leads to criminal behavior, because stealing is bad, of course. Let's never forget that. That's not the my argument is saying we should be stealing, just to get rid of that obvious reality. I shouldn't even have to say it, of course. And in desperate times, feeding your children, feeding your family, when there's shortage of water or shortage of food, shortage of basic means like energy and heating, which are owned by the billionaires still, and they steal money from you and then take these monies from tax havens, turning around and saying you're the problem, you're the disease, you're the scum of the earth. And this next statement, quote, is from Tim Gurner, Gurner, who's a multi-millionaire, wishes to be a billionaire, of course, part of the Abrahamic religions. He says people are not suffering enough in austerity. He says we should have more unemployment. He says that the more that the poor suffer, the happier they will be, because he's completely and utterly insane. Or is he? Because if he's making the poor suffer, guess who gets richer? Well, does all that wealth that the working class generate, make, and work for, where does that all go? It all goes to people like Tim Gurner, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And his rhetoric of horror is mirrored by Trump, mirrored by most of the billionaires, if not all the billionaires, because to become a billionaire, the very fact of that is gross. I don't mean like Elon Musk billionaire, because he's only billionaire through shareholders, but he's still a very questionable human being, of course. So they make you suffer, and then every act you do just to survive, they criminalize. The poor, the prisons are full of the poor in America and across the world. They're not for the real criminals who stole all our wealth. Thank you. So any volunteers to go next? If not, Martin.
Okay.
Go for it.
So yeah, I was thinking about this question, and I can try and sort of come from a real lived experience of shoplifting. So I've worked in retail for 20 years, and I've seen all different kinds of shoplifters. The occasional person nicking one little chocolate bar, which is really not the end of the bod, and people stealing to order, as in they get a big bag and it's all to order. It's it's all like so. And very recently we've seen an increase in, I think the aggression has changed. Often when we're faced with a shoplifter, if they're going to be very aggressive, or there's 2, maybe 3 of them, my staff, we're outnumbered. And obviously we're going to let them take what they want and go, because I'm not going to put anyone at risk. I think that is shoplifting a sign that capitalism is failing? I think it's a sign that capitalism is doing quite well. I think it's doing quite well. I think that, maybe you could look at the model, you could go, look, we can drive these people to be so desperate that they're stealing things. Maybe they have a drug habit where they're in this cycle where they have to steal something to get the money to feed their drug habit. If there was a mental health support system that was properly funded, that actually had the ability to help people that could, come off the drugs, maybe they would have an opportunity to be better people, to kind of move forward. We know that our government and the rich, the wealthy, they close down youth services. They close down the ability for kids to go and learn something cool, like learn how to do boxing or learn how to, I don't know, like evening classes. There's loads of different things that they can keep young people engaged so that they're not tempted to go along with someone that says, go and steal this. You want to be some kind of gangster and have loads of money and blah, blah, blah. They're not being sold that. They're being sold more a sense that you can be part of a community with these other people, because obviously community is key. If you take that away, then you get things like this. So there's no proper support for youths, and the less they're able to help people with mental health issues, the less the police are supported. It drives people that are quite desperate to even more desperate measures. So, I mean, from our point of view, I sympathise a little bit with some of the shoplifters because I don't know what their story is. I don't know how they got to my front door before they started stealing stuff. But there's some sympathy there.
Could you explain one thing? Because I'm making great points here, points on it. But you made a statement which I couldn't understand. You said this is a sign that capitalism is working. Could you explain that again, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, it's a sign that the rich, the wealthy, the ones that could help but choose not to, their system works in a way. It keeps us.
That kind. Okay.
It keeps us all distracted. It keeps us all in a constant circle of desperation, in a sense. And they can just sit back and go, "Well, we're all right. We're fine. We don't really care if that little shop there has to shut down because they're just getting hit by shoplifters. They don't care if the high street suffers because that's what will happen. Is the high street will suffer? It already is suffering at the moment. Okay. So I don't think they're really gonna care. And I think maybe the end goal of a sign of them, what happens when it reaches a certain point, was in the London riots, and you saw that really, go explode in the sense where people just, taking what they wanted, and those in power could have stopped any of that happening, but they sat back and I don't care. It's not my house. It's not my stuff getting taken. What does it matter to me? And if they don't support shop owners, then what happens when the shop owners get so desperate they start to feel that they can do what they want? They feel like they can do what they want in order to stop the shoplifters. So what if they start having weapons behind the till, or what if they start to? Because obviously, if a shoplifter comes in, you can't actually physically throw them out. But what happens if people are pushed so far that that's what they start doing? And I get where they'd be coming from when they feel like they've got to defend their premises, but you're pushing people to use violence, and any system that promotes or tries to get people to use more violence is never a good system. So I think it is a sign that it's working. It is a problem on the high street. Obviously, the papers make it way bigger than maybe what it necessarily is. It is an ongoing issue, and it has got worse. But I think it plays into what those rich and very wealthy people want.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're doing anything to stop it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Austerity has driven up theft on the high street, and the rich don't live anywhere near the hell that they've introduced in society. Right, so just getting a little over 5 minutes each, by the way, because of
okay.
Because we've all got a little over 5. I'm very, it's the way it is. I'm always make sure we all get the same time.
Could I share? I'm going to share my screen again. I like doing the reading thing. Is that all right? So cool. Oh, have you gone quiet? Your
No,
voice is still
We're just
there.
waiting
No.
for your
Okay, cool.
revelation.
Oh, okay, sure. Here's my revelation. Here we go. Rise in shoplifting. Is it proof of that capitalism's failed? As usual, I'll read from the Holy Quran. It is provided for you that you will not hunger therein, nor will you be naked, and you will not thirst therein, nor will you be exposed to the sun. Holy Quran, chapter 20, verse 119 to 120. I will make that into a link so people can check it out themselves. In short, God has created enough for all creation to have its basic needs of food, clothing, water, and shelter met. This is a requirement of Islamic government to provide this to everybody. These basic needs protect us from capitalistic slavery of low income. So it's very easy to create slaves in this day and age if we just give really low incomes, or all the billionaires collude to give really low income, so everybody's forced to work for nothing and basically be a slave. My big problem is that people are not clear about what is capitalism. So when I research what capitalism is, it's essentially the right to own things, to have private ownership. And then after that results in your right to be able to give it to other people in exchange for other things, which is trade. And that's not a bad thing. I doubt there'll be many people who say to be able to own things like Dust's hat and all that kind of stuff, right, is a bad thing. And it's also very dangerous to throw away the good things that we're benefiting from capitalism.
Is this going to come to shoplifting? Because you're not talking about shoplifting at the moment. This is about why people are stealing. Can you just elaborate why you think people are stealing, please?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I was going to say, okay, very briefly, China is before it became capitalistic, it attempted communism, and you had disaster, people being more poor. So let's come back to the shoplifting bit. Thank you for making that point, that maybe I'm not being direct enough. So if people are becoming poor because of capitalism, which is true because it's unbridled capitalism without any rules or any morality is going to lead to that, you're going to have the same problems, even worse, with communism. When you don't have capitalism, which is private ownership, the opposite of that is communism, when you're not allowed to own things yourself. And the reason why that's dangerous is because capitalism has a function, which is to give resources to different people at the right time and the right purpose, right? It's actually very complicated. As soon as you stop that, loads of people starve. That's the reality of China. One of my favorite entrepreneurs, Jack Ma.
Can I just
sorry,
say,
go on.
No one's promoting communism. Because you criticize capitalism doesn't mean communism.
I think it does.
Okay. So
because it's an alternative. What's the alternative?
You seriously, you can't think of any alternative to anything now apart from communism. Is that what you're suggesting?
Okay, let me put it this way. Thank you for helping me clarify this, right? So I believe in moral capitalism, which means there are some basic needs that should be met, like I quoted in the beginning, okay, that protects the poor. So that's that's my position. So I don't think capitalism is it depends I think our problem here right now between us is that maybe we've got different ideas of what capitalism is. For me, capitalism just means private ownership is allowed, okay? But there should be rules to stop people enslaving other people through the system, okay, by giving people their basic needs so they don't have to do unnecessary jobs or jobs that basically don't pay. And I was gonna so that's my key point there. And then I just want to agree with some of the other points that people have made. So Dust is right that billionaires should not own public resources such as oil and energy resources. Agreed. That's what I basically said in the beginning. There are basic needs that should be actually, I didn't say that. I just realized that's another quote I had in my mind, but I didn't actually write down. But basically, in Islam, the owners of the land owned the land. So if your government owns the land on your behalf, like the oil and things, that belongs to everybody, and private individuals allowed to give it to other people, but to the benefit of all the people, right? Not just billionaires. So, and also there's a great video about how money makes you mean. So it is true when you're and this is what psychologists have found. So it is, I agree with Dust on that billionaires can be really ruthless and careless about, and Martin made the same point, that careless and ruthless about the needs and of the average person.
30 seconds.
Martin has said we should give mental health help to everybody, and also provide, community services so that people can find alternatives to community rather than gangs, because that's often the last resort to finding community, the social need that all people need, including kids. So I think that's a fantastic, also very important solution that government should provide. And also Martin point out the dangerous cycle that we could go into if we don't protect people's basic needs. So people will start resorting to weapons to defend their shops and things, and then when the shopkeepers get their weapons out, then the gangsters will get their weapons out. Very dangerous cycle. The easy solution, Islam, is provide everybody their basic needs. Thank you.
That was wonderful. I think we should go for a 5-minute round each again, and then finish with 1 minute. And again, Khalid, please jump in with statements when me and Martin are. Oh, right.
Don't ignore the lovely comments. Yeah.
We've got a shoplifting is a crime. The public resource in the hands of the rich, so it's also a crime. Capitalism is not wrong. It needs rules to regulate it, so everyone can benefit, not just the very rich. So, right. Thank you for that.
Great summary, I think.
Interjection. I think that's very healthy. So, moral capitalism. If you ever want a pretty accurate description of what socialism is, it's moral capitalism. I think that's a very healthy interjection. I think it's what the message, you argue, that Jesus was trying to promote before he was murdered for saying that, well, should the rich all have all the money? He was murdered for basically what I, Khalid, and Martin have been saying. That's why he was murdered. And that's why they had to take him out, because moral capitalism means that this vision that Khalid and Martin are saying that the people should go about, but just having the basic resources is not living. There's no question whatsoever that, oh, damn it. There's no question whatsoever that just having the basic resources is living. That's utter disingenuous to humanity, because each human being wants to grow and see their family grow, learn, be creative, have resources available to them, and demonstrate their humanity. And that can only be done when basic needs are met. And if basic needs are not met, people will steal.
Can I just clarify? Are you saying you just said having your basic needs met is not living, and then you're saying you should have your bit. Can you clarify what you mean? Like, is it enough or not enough?
Slavery is having your basic needs met. That's what slavery is. Your basic needs met, so you can therefore work. Food, shelter, water. That's slavery. That's the very definition of slavery. Living in that fear of when you oppose the current leadership, which they would call Satan, of course. Remember that Satan is the word oppose in Hebrew. So let's not forget, when you oppose your slave master, you'll get classed as a Satan, which is where Tim Gurner comes in with his gross horror that people need to suffer more to appreciate the life they need and what it is to work. And Hitler famously said, work sets you free. That's one of his great Catholic rhetoric of his vomitous understanding of Abrahamic existences. Work sets you free, the great Abrahamic quotation. It's just, but fundamentally, concentration camp is water, food, shelter, just enough for you to do the work. Concentration camp, slavery. horrific. And in those situations, you create division, resentment, misery, and people will steal and try to do other acts to rebel. When rebellion is no way of living, life well lived is what Martin describes: social services, national health services, youth groups. All these things have been stripped away. All hope has been stripped away. All happiness is stripped away. And we're left with a world of pollution, war, division, and desperate just for the basic human rights that we all deserve and have always deserved throughout our civilization for 1,000 years. It's the same message being repeated, and yet it's against the Abrahamic religion, which have constantly owned all these resources and are the ultimate consumer. Their great consumerism now is oil, which Khalid has defended and promoted, not promoted, but promotes by not criticizing it and excusing the pollution of global warming, which is lead to desperation, stealing.
Okay.
And as we said earlier, the rich don't live in the hell that they make us live in. If they did, I can guarantee you this, they would change their ways instantly. If the billionaires had to live in our communities, they'd change their life immediately. They wouldn't pursue such horror shows because they would have the same resources as we do, drink the same polluted water that we do, breathe the same polluted air. I got a frog in my throat. So yeah, theft goes up when the billionaires have their dream of reality, which is us living in austerity, war, and pollution. Of course, criminality happens. Of course, the next war can be now justified because that's a logical solution. And the next religious idea, no matter how ridiculous, now seems sane and rational. Scientology being a great example. But you can have faith without suffering. But clearly, some religious people need to suffer, but the majority don't. And thievery and theft is just a sign that capitalism has failed, unless you're a billionaire and you're living the heaven on earth. Right, Martin, 5 minutes.
Okay, I can kind of close with like again, like a lived experience of dealing with shoplifting, seeing it change. For example, recently we had people come in. They're again just a couple of young lads. But they were very aggressive to the point where they're trying to throw things at staff, throw things at customers that are in the shop. When we call the police aren't going to turn up. They'll turn up probably long after those lads have gone. The police probably won't have much power to do anything. We kind of rely on, in some ways, the security guard, which from another shop coming over to say, do we need any help? We have that kind of town link radio, but if something really bad happens, there isn't many people that are going to, we don't know how long it'll be till the police turn up or something like that. But I think I'm kind of with Dustin on this. I think all this can be resolved, but I think the people that have that power to do that, or the money and the funding and the numbers to do that, aren't interested in fixing this problem, because there must be a reason why someone is desperate enough or bored enough or fueled enough to go and just be horrible to people in the shop. They could be doing so much more sort of creative things if they had that opportunity. If you take that opportunity away, then and you fill it with all this other stuff, then what do people do? And what I also learned, which is these lads, as much as we report them over and over again, the only thing that's really going to happen is that the council would report these kids to the parent. The parents would be report to the council, etc., and they could lose their home. So you see, there's that cycle. So you'd have to fix the problem and put funding back into, so we can take away that issue where why we have to question why are these lads feeling the need to come into a shop just to cause trouble? What's the reason behind that, and why do they do that? And then two other people can walk past and they're not interested in causing trouble. What shaped their upbringing for them to feel like that's what they need to do, or that's entertaining to them, or and it's not necessarily an attack on the parents, because the parents could be working non-stop. Single parents can't watch what their kids are doing all the time, young teenagers doing all the time, if they're having to work constantly to get money to buy food, which the prices have gone up. So it's that constant cycle of, I think, orchestrated by those that are in power, that have money and wealth. And I'd like to see the Prime Minister come down and run the shop when there's shoplifters in, because he wouldn't have a clue what to do.
That
if
is
some of
very
those
true.
people came down and lived in the real world on a high street, worked 9 to 5, they would get an extreme shock. They wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't know how to handle it. To kind of answer the
Can I
question,
just
go
add
on.
quickly just to that? The reason why we did end with national nationalisation, what Khalid's talking about, moral capitalism, by the way, after World War II, is because those rich kids that you're describing, Martin, had to help out in the war. They actually had to do real work, because it wasn't all the working class had been slaughtered in the war. So the rich kids had to do all the jobs the working class were doing. And they realized that absolutely horrific situation that most people have to live. And then those same people then created new policies in just after 1945. And that's the reason why, one of the prime reasons, not the reason, sorry, one of the prime reasons why the National Service happened and moral capitalism happened. And the world from that point was fundamentally better for many decades, until Margaret Thatcher came along and reversed everything.
Yeah. No fan of Margaret Thatcher there at all. And I agree with you there. The NHS is a superb example of what we can achieve. But sadly, that's been destroyed and underfunded, and like so many great things at the moment, it's gradually being taken away. Our music venues and community centres, things like that, will be taken away. Go on, next. I think that was my time, wasn't it?
So I'll briefly go through some of the comments. Dust says, having basic resources, not living it, is slavery. So I was talking about giving basic resources without working, so that would not be slavery, so you don't have to work for your basic needs. Hitler says work sets you free. There is some truth in that. If we get things too easily, we become vegetables. So it's a danger of giving too much too easily for free with no work at all. And we feel depressed if we are not working hard to make progress and taking part in making our world better. So I'm not saying I love Hitler. People like try to jump straight onto that bandwagon. If he says something that makes some sense, we've got to support it. Okay, Dust says, if billionaires suffered like we do, then they would stop it. That is true. And the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad says, I can't get the exact quote, but basically he said, take care of the needs of the people at the bottom of society, because society stands on them or depends on them. So we noticed that during the COVID epidemic, when we clapped for the dustbin people, the nurses, because we knew the society would collapse if they didn't do their job. Martin says, why are some people poor and bored enough to shoplift? And that's a really good point, because we also do things because not just because we're poor, but we're all because we're bored. Okay, and this is what people hate, a lot of people hate, and some people appreciate. No father figures leads to criminality. Generally, this is known by psychologists. Also, but I think you guys will like the rest of it, which is individualism has removed youth clubs. So I think that kind of mentality. We're not just victims of the elite. We should take responsibility for voting for our government. But generally, I sort of wind up with saying, thank you, Martin. I like, his very practical on the ground experience, and Dust, your compassion for the poor, that you're bringing up these very important topics. Thank you.
You've still got 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. I was trying to do it in like 1 minute or something. I've actually said everything.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah,
on
yeah,
something
yeah,
you
yeah.
just
No, we've
said
got
then,
loads of
Gary?
time.
Okay, yeah. He can ask me a question, and I'll be my time
Got
sort
loads
of thing
of
when I answer it.
So that statement you just said about individualism, can you just say that statement again?
So individualism has led to removal of youth clubs and things like that, because we just care about ourselves. We don't care about society.
I don't think it's led to the removal of youth clubs, because if you had youth clubs and community centres, you're still celebrating an individual person. You're given a place for that person to be an individual and express themselves. I don't think it removes that at all.
Okay.
I don't think that.
I mean, I think I think that how does it work? You get a government, and the government makes policies. Some governments have more youth clubs, some governments have less youth clubs. Now, when we were more social, when we cared about our neighbors and things, we would get governments that reflect society more, and we would have more society-based or community-based things like youth clubs. And those are disappearing. And we can see, I mean, we are objectively more individualistic and less social, because we have an epidemic of loneliness, which is the biggest killer in London. So we're objectively more selfish, I would say. So that's being reflected in the elite. I think it's very important to say whatever we see in the government, that's coming from us. But people don't like to hear that.
Okay. I don't think celebrating individualism necessarily breaks down a community. It doesn't mean you're rejecting other people. You're celebrating each people's individual ideas, but you bring them together to form a better community with more colours and shades and lots more interesting things.
I get what you're saying
about it. It's not. It doesn't shut down. It only empowers the community, I would have thought. But sorry, I think Dust wanted to say something. So.
Yeah, I mean, these youth groups Khalid is promoting can only work in a society where it's not one religious group that owns that society, an individual society, by one individual religious group, because they just become churches or synagogues or mosques. That's what I think maybe Khalid is really saying. He's saying that youth groups, not what I know that these two here are saying one thing, and I'm going to sort of get on the back of that and just miss out the fact that, well, yeah, what I mean by youth club is a religious centre. I think, can you just clarify, is that's what you really mean?
Sorry, I was responding to a very interesting comment, and so he said, so I missed what you said, because our friend Ulrich, who is, I've forgotten your name now, real name, Nazish, I think, something like that. He was saying that a certain demographic is responsible for shoplifting, and I was saying, which demographic? Is it black people? Because let's just dive into it. Is that what you're talking about? But what was your comment, Das? Sorry, I missed it when I was responding to the live chat.
I was just saying, I'm just trying to classify whether you're being disingenuous or not when talking about youth centres. Do you really mean religious centres when you say youth centres?
No, that's not what I had in mind, but I do think religious centres, religious people generally do create communities much better than non-religious people do. And
okay.
Yeah. But also, can I just mention, because something comes to my mind, is that religious values make community much easier. So I went to a park yesterday, and people are so social at a different level than I see in England, where people help each other out. And I've got it on video, people just helping each other up because they don't feel distant from each other. So that's just a cheap solution to solving this problem. You don't have to have a special club. You just have public spaces, which we also have in England, but people are more connected in those public spaces. So that's a thought. And I did a YouTube video on this yesterday demonstrating that.
What do you think the National Health Service is not open each other freely? That's the literal definition of...
Yeah, and that came from a more religious era, when people were more Christian.
It came from a social group, and they believe in moral capitalism, and they don't have... I got a red thumb. They don't have... it's not driven by any religious group, which you're tying any good act to your religion. And I think there's a danger of you being disingenuous when you're making statements. So I'd like you to, in future, just say a religious youth group. Because if you don't, because otherwise you're coming across as being disingenuous when you just say youth group, because you clearly don't mean that at all. And you know the context that we're talking about, where religion doesn't play a part of youth groups, but every religion is welcome, and no brainwashing of which religion is correct or right is happening in youth groups. But you're allowed to be respectfully and cherished for your religious or ideology, assuming you're not harming everyone else. So you do have to create a distinction.
I mean, I think my response is you're making claims about my intentions which are incorrect. That's what I'll say. But a very important point you said made in the chat.
You did say a moment ago that it should be religious.
No, I said religious values make more people more connected. So in the park, I didn't know what religious background everybody had. We've got Christians and Muslims in this country, and people, I don't know what other faiths, right?
Okay.
But they were more connected because of shared religious values, because they all believe they were brothers and sisters. This is an unusual way to think in England. We don't consider ourselves brothers and sisters or there to help each other out. We consider ourselves strangers. No, I'm talking about in community. I'm doing like in community.
National Service is in community.
And I already responded thing about but okay, so shoplifting is the key thing we're talking about. And one idea is to blame capitalism, but another way of looking at it, according to Ulrich, and I suggested this as well, is it Black people are overrepresented? And I like we don't shy away from talking about potentially politically incorrect topics. So what is it that's causing Black people to be overrepresented in shoplifting? I would suggest lack of fathers in the family. Okay, it doesn't mean I hate Black people. In fact, I want to move to Africa. I love Black people. I'm more African, not westernized African people, but African people who, I love their energy and their true original nature. That's where I'm coming from. But in our Western society, in a materialistic society which doesn't value marriage, and psychologists have told us when fathers leave relationships and their responsibility to fatherhood, they are the police figures that keep stability and teach, especially young men, how to behave. This sounds really rude, but I think it's more rude and harmful to ignore it as a possibility and not work on it and think of it as a permanent situation. These things can be improved. We should care for young men who are missing out and say, you know what, this is not right. We should improve that. Different parts of societies have different weaknesses. That's one weakness currently in, let's say, generally Black. I would say more Caribbean, not so much traditional Black African, but also more so becoming more common in African traditional societies in England as well. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Martin?
Again, when you said stuff about gay people in the previous thing, you're kind of on a slippery slope here. One thing I think you should maybe clout or look at, or you're misrepresenting there's just because family doesn't have a male father figure in it, doesn't mean that the child necessarily is going to go down a bad path. A child can be brought up to be a perfectly good human being, contributing human being with a strong mother as a guide. Maybe the father could have been very bad, and leaving could have been the best thing. So to try and put that together doesn't make any sense, because we know, you can see it all around us, that a single mother can raise a perfectly good child, and a single father can raise two male partners can raise a perfectly good human being.
But can I interject with a question, which is there, what's the reality behind the statistics? Is it just a freak of statistics? The statistics have no reason behind it? Is that what you're saying?
Just looking around you, just by I know plenty of people, and close to people, that have been raised in single families, and maybe the father, if you want to be talking about the father, was the toxic influence. So being free of that person meant the family had a chance to be happier. So it feels more like that's when you say stuff. What you were saying, it's you're attacking a single parent, a single mother, and trying to promote this side. I don't know, bad ideas. I don't know. It doesn't sound very. And when you said about the pandemic, or that part, we saw a huge sense of community amongst people, because people helped out and they looked after each other. And there are examples of that over and over and over and over and over again. That people knocked on their neighbour's door and said, "Do you need anything from the shops?" And people done more of that in a pandemic. So it kind of showed the worst side of us in some ways, but also the best side of us, which isn't anything to do with a God. It's just us as human beings, secular human beings. We're capable of great acts when we're sometimes pushed to it. We can do incredible things. And when it comes to shoplifters, they're all different colours and shapes and sizes. There's no. It's not all black people that are that are coming into the shop to steal stuff. There's all different kinds of people that come in to take the opportunity to try and nick something. But one particular community, when you say black people, they are represented more because we have in my opinion, a very right-wing media agenda, fueled by the rise of Donald Trump, who made it acceptable to say certain things out loud and still have a career after it. And so the media can.
So you're saying this statistic is fake?
More and more and more, and show them in a bad light. It just fuels the racism. That's all it does.
So I'm just clarifying. You're saying this statistic is fake. Just to clarify, is that what you're saying, Martin?
No,
The statistic that what you were saying
that black people are more overrepresented in this kind of criminality, shoplifting and things. Is it fake?
I think they are more represented because there's an agenda.
Oh, so you don't say it's fake? It is true.
I don't think it's to say it's all black people. No, of course it's not all one.
It's not all. That's not the statistic. It's overrepresented is a different word to all. It's not 100%.
Right. Well, I'm just saying what I'm saying. I'm just
okay, cool.
trying
cool,
to answer you.
Sure. I don't want to keep interjecting. Yeah, I'm not a racist either. It's true. Just to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Says everyone.
But Dust doesn't believe me. Go on.
I might use my. I don't know. I think there's a danger in how you maybe representing certain things and promoting certain things, which could be a different conversation altogether.
Sure.
But remember that the media will decide today that they don't like black people. Tomorrow they'll decide they don't like gay people. The next day they decide someone else is the target. So when they overrepresent them, or they over target certain people, it's because, for me, I think there's a right-wing media agenda behind that, to target a particular community who historically are always targeted. But there you go. That's you can speak.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll answer that question. It's we live in a society that's horrifically racist against minority groups. So our minority group, of course, is the black community, and they are denied the resources that are absolutely required. If it's a shame Khaled hasn't really been engaging and listening to what me and Martin have been saying, is that in poverty, different things will happen. And the more impoverished you make a community, the more that community will resort to desperate actions. There, this father thing is just such a it just fails to even address the realities of this world. It's just an easy thing to understand. Firstly, it's easy to understand. Oh, no father, problem. There you go. You don't have to put much thought into that. You don't have to understand how that poverty existed to begin with. And let's not forget the majority of the black community is deeply Christian and comes from a very deeply rooted Christian methodology, which is not theirs, which was given to them by their slave owners when these Abrahamic religions went off to Africa to rape, slavery, and create massive injustice. Abrahamic religions, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, did horrific things in the name of their God. And the idea now just saying, oh yeah, it's their black fathers, that's the problem. Oh yeah, let's forget again this 2,500 years of history, which has been horrendous. I mean, that's the main theme, which leads to ridiculous statements like, yeah, it's father, we've got to look into that. Clearly, if you come from horrific repression, racism, poverty, then committing yourself to a well-rounded, human, beautiful, creative life is far more harder in that scenario, which is why we should always have situations where whoever is a minority should have equal representation in government, which we don't. Equal representation in business leaders, which we don't. This is including women, by the way. We're not just talking about the black community here. Equal representation in universities as leaders, we don't, because of the profound racism which happens. And when you leave someone in poverty, that's done by design, and that is absolutely designed to make sure that my idea of reality never happens, which is having equal representation. What we live in is not a democracy, it is a dictatorship. It's Khalid's perfect dream.
Can I ask, actually, quick question to Dust? What is capitalism? Your definition?
Yeah, so
I've never heard it.
Thank you very much. I've tried to explain this before, but it's the right to own things is, again, very simplistic way of understanding. I mean, everybody in any system that's ever been created has the right to own the thing that they own, whether it's capitalism or it's immaterial. I mean, even communists had objects that they owned, that they had, and had the right to that. Capitalism is, I think the problem here with Khaled is struggling with it is because he can only, you only picture reality from your point of view, your perspective, but you're not seeing it from the perspective of a billionaire.
No, but I'm just waiting for a definition. You can't give me a definition?
I can't give a definition that you can understand.
Oh, okay.
The problem's not me.
I get the problem.
The problem is your framework of nuance.
But you're not just explaining to me. Explain it to Martin. Ignore me. Just explain to Martin what is capitalism.
Capitalism is a philosophy built from Abrahamic religion to excuse gross wealth and leave the world in horrific poverty. That is capitalism moral capitalism, which Khaled, I agree with, is antithesis of this Abrahamic dream, what capitalism is. And moral capitalism is where we have ownership, but we also have say over the resources in a society and a share in the profit of that. The profit doesn't just disappear to a tax island off in wherever it happens to be, Lithuania, even though it's land. I did that on a little joke. And capitalism just is, and always has been, this just gross representation. That's what the synagogues, the religious leaders, have always promoted, that wealth and communism should be done by the Abrahamic religion. They are the ultimate consumers, which is why the royal families like Saudi Arabia own all the oil, and the Christians own all the oil companies, and they justify their horrific poverty, leaving people in slavery to steal things, as a good thing, because that means they get to get to keep all the wealth that the working class does. How are we doing for time? We've got 5 minutes. I think we've all had.
Yeah, everybody, if you want.
So I'll just conclude that, yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous saying fathers from the black community. They come from a very devout Christians society, and that has just led them into saying that poverty is fine because you're going to get your just desserts in heaven, which is clearly a gross lie. Heaven should be on earth. That's the only place heaven should ever be. And I'll conclude until, so anyone else like to add anything? Because then we'll go into the 1 minute section.
Oh,
okay. No, I was just doing my 1 minute thing whenever you're ready.
Yeah, the only thing I might add there maybe is it's good to try and think, like, so obviously I'm a white person. I walk into a shop. I have a very different experience to someone that's black that walks into a shop, because of security guard has certain ideas. That black person is going to be treated very differently in their experience walking around that shop to obviously the experience I have. So that's why, it's dangerous. It's because you can unfairly target certain people that aren't unfairly treated. So by trying to sort of label the whole sort of one community, black people, one, with one thing, I think it would be very unfair. I don't know if that contributes.
I mean, I like to also, because I love people's participation, Ulrich's participation. He says, India experienced all these crimes by the British, but Indians are not shoplifting. Instead, you could say examples. The Prime Minister is now British, an Indian person, and so many other examples like that. CEOs of a lot of the top tech companies are run by Indians, so that's a very strong point. And so I would say that's kind of rebutting Dust's argument that, thousands of years of oppression has led to this result. I do actually agree that there is some effect of generations of oppression in the past. It's not without cause. There is a cause and effect. But I think we also have to take responsibility. We also... so that's just a response to that. I'm kind of like a middle ground. Like, yes, there is cause and effect of generation of oppression. Yes, but also you have to take responsibility. And when you take responsibility, you find the way out. When you see yourself as a victim, you never find your way out because you lost. There's a word, agency. You lost when you become a victim. You've lost agency. Is my argument. Agency means. Do people really know what I mean by agency? Like the ability to control?
Agency, which is one of my favorite terms I use a lot, is just having a complete picture of the actions that you are about to make and making them in a way that doesn't that you choose to do with experience and understanding.
I mean, I see it differently. Like you've got agency for me means the ability to take action and make change in your life, basically. But that's what I meant. But anyway, we might have different
We
definitions.
just said the same thing.
Oh, did we? Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, cool. Anyway, so 1 minute round. Who wants to go first? Maybe we should have Dust last because that's your question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
I
I
think
still feel Martin's like our guest because he's only come twice. So I feel like getting him go first.
So remember the title is, of course, is shoplifting proof that capitalism has failed.
Would you like to go first, Martin? Go for it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a sign that it's failing or has failed. And I don't think it has. I don't think it has failed. I think the model's worked, and the result of that is getting worse. And my asking me now how you fix something or how you try to make things better would be to rebuild a community, not a community as in we all need God or we all need this holy Bible, whatever Abrahamic religion thing. We get back to being a community as in humans, secular. We help each other because helping each other is a good thing to do, and everyone gets the benefit from that. So that's how we go back to rebuilding the community, and we make sure that funding is there to help people that need it, and the resources are there to help people, and then we all get to grow better. The end result of that is people getting better, and being better people. So that's my short little minute, which is just on time.
Beautiful.
That was perfect.
Okay. Martin's brilliant at this already. I'll just say my two things. I like to come at it from two different angles. There's a systemic level, the high level, which is we need to provide people's basic needs so they're not they're not oppressed and therefore don't revolt against the system, and therefore if you break the system, it's going to be bad for everybody. If everybody shoplifts, it's going to be bad for everybody. Nothing will work. So you need to give everybody their basic needs without even having to work for it. So it can't be forced into jobs that don't pay much because, billionaires and all these people can work together to break down the capitalist system. And I think we kind of agreed in many ways that there is a version of capitalism that can be good. Let's call it moral capitalism. Some people call it socialism. Okay. And finally, I do like to go like what the bottom-up approach is: take some agency, accept some responsibility that we are also the cause of the problems. Some people shoplift more than others. Some people, we have also voted for these terrible governments. We need to take responsibility as well. Thank you.
Well, oops. So Martin's right. You're rich. Capitalism's beautiful and wonderful. But there's only about 2,000 people that are rich, 2,000 billionaires on this planet who dictate everything. They dictate your government. They dictate that you should be stealing. They dictate that you should be suffering. They dictate that you should not receive proper medical care or proper education. And this all leads to one terrible conclusion, which is desperation, horror, and poverty of choice. Poverty of choice is, of course, what a human being can never have. You need to have choice and agency, and that's done with wealth, which they have theft. They have shoplifted from your community and your lives. That is the capitalist dream, and that is hell for everybody on earth. Thank you. That's been a wonderful talk. Cal has been an excellent and patient and very informative host, and I'm sure all our viewers have listened and contributed with true passion and sincerity, which is all we ask for in life. Thank you, Martin, for your contribution and your time. It's so important and brilliant what you're doing. You're one of my heroes, of course, as is Khalid, for making these hosts and hosting and shows and letting this wonderful alternative and rational views being expressed here on this channel. I think that's a beautiful thing to do. So thank you, everyone. I am the
Thank
Dust.
you, Dust. You're my hero as well. Martin, you're my hero.
And I'm
Everyone's heroes.
settled.
Sorry, I ruined Dust's setup, but yeah, you guys
You
are my
did.
heroes. Really, it would be if it was just me talking, it would be so dull. Nobody would watch it. It'd be just me talking and reading, and it'd be boring. I've experienced it; it's terrible. So you guys are my heroes for basically giving up your mornings. You could be doing something really selfish, but you know what? You're doing something intellectual. You're trying to, make society better. And you're doing it consistently, which is a really hard thing to do. People are just like, yeah, I'll have a bit of fun once in a year. But you guys, especially Dust, I have to say, just keeps going.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Cool. Cheers, dude.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right. So it's going to hang up on this, but Martin, hang in, because we always do the thing where we discuss questions for next week. So I'm just going to end stream. Thank you, everybody.